Hello everybody, I'm going to read you a story. Once upon a time, in a world far away, every single person in that world had fallen ill with a grave sickness. It had happened a long time before, and though people had tried all sorts of things, nothing had worked to make them better. But there was one group of people who had been told, since before anyone could remember, that one day someone would be born to one of their families who would have the cure for this illness. And that through that cure, everyone in the whole world would be able to be made better. So ever since then, they'd held that promise that the cure from the whole world would come from them. They'd held it carefully and they'd held it solemnly and with quite some pride. They waited and waited, but no one came. And as they waited, they remembered the bit about the cure, and they remembered how special they were, but perhaps gradually they began to forget the bit about the cure being for everyone else as well as for them. They began to think of themselves as rather special, because in a way, of course, they were actually rather special. They began to call themselves the special people, and everyone else in the world they called the others. Or if they were feeling particularly rude, they sometimes called them the bean eaters. No one knows why. Then, one day, to one family, a boy was born. As he grew up, he heard the old story, and he gradually realized that he was the one who held the secret of the cure, the one through whom the whole world could be healed. He began to tell others of his people about this, just a few at first. This was something very precious and very important. And it was vital that the news was handled carefully, not rushed or shouted about too soon. Not everyone might understand, and after all these years, as I've said, not everyone remembered every bit of the promise correctly. So the news, and the beginning of the cure itself, had to be let out carefully, first to a few people, then to others within the special people, and only after that to the rest of the world. But somehow the news began to spread, and little bits of the cure began to leak out and start to change people's lives. They started to feel better, to see the world differently. Not only their bodies, but even their heads and their hearts started to heal. And one day someone came along who wasn't part of the special people. She was one of the others. She came to the man and she asked really urgently if he would give some of that cure to her daughter who was now gravely ill. The friends of the man looked at her. A bean eater? Trying to get the cure? Outrageous! They tried to chase her away. They told the man to send her away. She was bothering them. How dare she? But the man turned to the woman. He said to her that he had come to give the cure first to those who'd held the promise for so long. But she fell at his feet and she begged him. The man looked at his friends, who gestured to him to send her away. What a nuisance this bean-eater was being. Why was he even bothering with her? The man looked back at the woman and he saw how much she was hurting. Is it right that I should give some of this special people's cure to a bean-eater? He asked her, and perhaps also his friends. But the woman had thought about this long and hard. She might have heard some of the old promise. Maybe she'd remembered bits that others had forgotten. Once the special people have had the cure, there'll be enough left over for the bean eaters, she argued. The man laughed with joy. You have understood, he said. You know and you believe the promise. And because she'd asked, and because she'd believed, he gave her that cure for her daughter. And she became one of the first bean eaters to get the cure anywhere in the world. In fact, before many of the special people. And that's the end of that story. Now that story is very like what we hear in our reading today. Jesus was the long-awaited Messiah who was coming from within the Jewish people to be the way for all people to be brought back to God. The Jewish people have been waiting for this Messiah for so long. They'd kind of forgotten that the Messiah, yes, of course, he was from them and for them, but also for the rest of the world. And so when in this story, a woman who wasn't a Jewish person came to ask Jesus to heal her daughter, they said they wanted to send her away. What's she doing? She has nothing to do with us. Send her away. But Jesus looked at her and he sort of maybe tested her a bit with his questions to see how much does she actually understand. And when he saw that she really believed, she really understood, and she knew that what he offered was not just forever and only for the Jewish people, but that there would be more left over, he cured her daughter. Because he hadn't just come for the Jewish people. He had come, and he has come for the whole world. And I wonder whether sometimes, even now, we make that same mistake. Because we're now the holders of that promise, of that good news, that God has come, that Jesus has come to bring us all back to himself. But sometimes I think we look at other people and we think, Jesus isn't for them. Maybe they seem too happy with what they've got. Maybe they seem too nasty. We think, well, they'd never be interested in God, or God would never be interested in them. Maybe we think they've got other gods. Their life is already full. But actually, Jesus came for everyone. And we hold the promise so that we can give it to others. So I wonder if there's someone that you can think about even today that you can pray would come to know God's love, and that perhaps you can even show God's love to and talk to them about God. Have a think and have a pray. Thank you.
Right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to make a card that we can send to somebody to say that God loves them. And to do this, we are going to have, what you'll need is a card. I'm going to do mine in red because it's going to have a pop-out heart inside, and I want my heart to be of red, and I thought it would be quite nice if the card was red as well. But you can do both the heart and the card in any other colour. You need a piece of card, coloured card, like that, as a card shape. A piece of white paper, just a little bit smaller than that. See, if I put that on top, you can see there's a little rim around it. And another piece of, just a scrap piece of card, big enough to cut a heart out of. You'll need some glue, scissors, and a pen and a pencil. And that should be enough, really. So what we'll start with doing is cutting out a heart, about as large as you think you'd like a cut-out heart, a pop-out heart inside the card to be. So the way I do that is I fold that in half and I sort of draw myself a little heart shape, something like that. And I cut it out along the line. And when I open it up, it should be a beautiful heart shape. Let's have a look. If you cut out half, you've already folded it. Then when you unfold it, the aim is that you've got a heart. So there we are, that's a heart. Now I fold it back again, so it looks like that. I take my white piece of paper, and that, I just put that so that the fold of the heart is against the fold of the paper. And then I take my pencil and I just trace gently around the shape of the heart, like that. Okay, and then I make myself a little mark here-ish for where the hinge is going to be, okay? So that's what it will look like. And then I take my scissors and I cut all the way up to that little hinge mark, and on the other side I cut again around the shape all the way up to that little hinge mark, so it remains attached, okay? And then when you open it up, you should have a little heart, which if you can then bend it or get your adult to help you bend it, when you close the card and then open it again, it should be a little pop-out heart, you see? That little bit of folding you might want your adult to help with because it can be a bit tricky. Then what you want to do is you want to put this insert into the main card. So get your glue stick or some other kind of glue which you might have. Glue stick is quite good because it doesn't dry and make the paper all wrinkly like some more wet glues do, I find. So carefully, whoops, as you can see I'm not that careful, but hopefully it's not a disaster. There we go, do that side. And carefully line it up and glue it down that side. If you get any little bobbles, actually what I find is if you just rub them, making sure your hands are fairly clean, the bobbles just disappear. And then do the same thing here. And you're very careful. What we're not going to do is glue the actual little pop-out heart down, obviously, because that would stop it popping out. There we are. Do that. Glue. There we go. And then open that out and just as carefully sort of smooth that down, smoothing out any little bubbles you might find with your very clean hands. Okay, there we go. Just test it. Ooh. Yeah, still working. Still working. See? And then just double check after you've folded it and unfold again, just double check that it's all still sticking together and there aren't any nasty little bubbles. Then you get this first heart that you did, and the aim is that we will then glue that on top of that pop-out bit, okay? So this is what's called the moment of truth, whether you've actually managed to cut it out accurately enough. I hope I have. There we go, I hope you have. I don't think it's going to be a huge disaster if there's a little rim around that either, or if it's just slightly not quite exactly the same shape. There we go. You stick it on top, matching up the folds, and then fold that just to press it closed like that, press it shut, open it out again, and there we have a card with a little pop-out heart on it. You just need to keep checking that any little bobbles aren't coming up. There we are. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write on the outside a little message I could write. God loves, I'll do that, like a little heart. If you're good at bubble writing, if you know bubble writing, you could also do bubble writing. God loves you. And a few extra hearts there. And I might do later, I might get some more colours in and just start colouring it a bit. Now the funny thing is I can see in the picture it looks like I've done that the wrong way around. That's just the camera. I did write it the right way around. But there we go. Write something like God loves you on the front of it, and then inside you can write a little message. Dear whoever it is, I just wanted to remind you that God loves you, and so do I. Love from your name, or whatever little message you want to do. So there we go. God's love is not just for us. God's love is there to be shared. Have fun making this.